You're listening to Pathways and Means, a podcast that inspires and shows people how to tap into their creative spirit. We sit down with leaders and makers in every industry to talk about their process, what inspires them, and about how to build incredible things with the power of creativity. The future belongs to the creators, so come join us. This is Pathways and Means. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Pathways and Means. I'm today's host, Connor England, one of the managing partners here at Creative Pathways and Means, and today we've got a very, very special guest. We've seen that creativity has a place in all sorts of the human experience, whether it's in arts and business and community, but when a lot of people think about creativity, our mind tends to go to the arts. We see people with incredible gifts in music and in dance, and one that often has been the most inspiring for us is the ability to take the spoken word and for you to marry up the heart and the beauty of the world that is inside you and is without you, and to put them together into something that speaks to many. Poetry is one of the most incredible and profound arts that the human experience has known for millennia. And today we are joined by somebody who has exemplified this in his own experience. And certainly in our time here in Kansas, we are joined by the one and the only Huascar Medina, Poet Laureate of Kansas. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. It's good to see you, Connor.
It's really good to see you too. I'm glad that we could make time together today.
Thank you for having me.
So, you have been on an absolute roller coaster here for the last couple of years, through this honor that you've been given and through those gifts that have helped manifest that. And we're excited for people to have a chance to get to meet you, for those that haven't had the chance to yet, and for those that have known you and followed along with your story, for us to maybe have the chance to dive into different aspects of what that's been like. But poetry is just this art of the word and the heart coming together, and clearly there has been something about that art that is rooted deeply inside you, that's spoken to you. I wonder if you might share what it is that poetry has meant to you along your journey.
Poetry has been a way that I view the world, the way that I explore my surroundings, the way that I observe things. I see poetry as a lens that I apply to my day-to-day living, my experience internally and externally, my relationships with people. It's also a form of language. I call poetry the language of emotion. You know, it allows us to speak things in a very simple way, in a soft way. No matter how complicated the issue is, it can be distilled into poetry, into a way that is received well by people in the public.
Can understand that completely. And I know a lot of us have come into our different arts at times in our lives to lift us up, to push us forward, to whether it's been SJ and I's experience with music that has both been a major gift for us in terms of expression. It's also been a gift for us in times where we've needed art to pull us from a place. I see art as an incredible tool to help heal and to help lift up. And I wonder what poetry, how has that art and that gift been with you throughout the years, right? Because it's even when you were really pretty young, poetry was starting to make an indelible impact on your life.
Poetry was my first best friend. You know, I moved around a lot growing up. My father's in the military and I'm introverted. So I would sit in a cafeteria at a new school and I'd have an anthology or collected works of a poet like Paul Laurence Dunbar. You know, I'll sit there and read his lyrics of lowly life. You know, I'd read poems like that and build relationships with people I've never met, but I feel like I empathize with. And empathy is a high form of understanding. You know, it's putting yourself in a place that you're not normally at, that you normally don't have access to. And you have to be quite vulnerable to be in that space. And being a person who's introverted and someone that's very soft and very vulnerable all the time, I'm quite open on how I feel and I express myself in that manner as much as possible. Poetry's allowed me to have those conversations with people. You know, there's something I say all the time is poetry allows you to share hard truths in soft ways, and you can do that with yourself and with other people through poetry. So poetry's always been there. Poetry's been there since I was 12, 13 on up, it's been the constant thing in my life, a relationship. And the thing I'm worried about is, where are my poetry books? Can I keep those? Or I write about the end of a relationship, or I write about the aspirations of the relationships I want in the future. I can delve into the difficulties that I've experienced in my family, or what I want the world to be like for me, and poetry allows me to put that onto paper, onto this page that's stationary, that's there. It's a way of bearing witness and holding it, and it holds the space now. It exists now. The minute you speak something into the world, or you write it down, it's an utterance, right? It's an aspiration for more than you have now, and poetry opens itself and lends itself to opportunity and to hope. So I've lived with hope because of poetry, and I don't think I would have if I didn't have it during those dark and hard times in my life when I was a youth and growing up and becoming a man.
It's really powerful. I think when people think of poetry in the canon of the arts that we see today, we see the glamour and the flash and the production of people stepping onto stage, or the Grammys, or Hamilton on Broadway. And poetry, I think, over the last several years, if people think of it in the modern context, it often goes to, Def Jam or slam poetry or spoken word. And I think many people, when they think of poetry in the modern context, they maybe go back to Shakespeare, Whitman, Neruda, etc. And maybe there's sort of this clash, as if it is something that was for old times but can't find its way in the modern context. And one of the most inspiring things, just watching along in your journey, has been seeing that it still has this incredible heartbeat that fits so well into the modern context, and in many ways might be accessible in a way that others might not have a chance to be on Broadway stage. But if they have a pen and a paper and they've got something in their soul, they've got the ability to interface with art. I'm curious how you see poetry in the modern context for somebody that maybe they've loved to read some of the greats that have been out there, but if they're looking to dive deeply into art, what would you say for somebody that maybe is interested in beginning their journey with poetry?
It's easy to name, canon, poets, individuals who've written influential work, right? That has kind of lived the test of times. But the present, the moment, the living word today, to me, is what's most important. Poetry is for everyone. To limit it to the most popular or most known also limits its outreach. So I've written poetry today now that is accessible to a large majority of people who normally don't have access to poetry or read poetry regularly. There are times I'm not even hiding behind metaphors anymore. I'm just sharing truth. I'm truth telling in a poem. That's become more acceptable. I think slam poetry has kind of pulled back the veil, behind those earlier types of poetry. And it's easy to categorize poetry into these segments, but truth is truth, and all truth is poetry. Not all truth is beautiful, and not all poetry is good. So it just really depends on what your preference is and how you like to engage with the art, the craft of writing words. Some people like long flowing poems and meter and rhyme. Some people like form poetry. Some people like free verse. Poetry is about opportunity of expression, and that's it. To limit it is to cut it short, to remove why it's been around so long and why it so impacts us today, because it's this living organism that grows constantly, and more people that we attach to it, the bigger and more power it has.
Truth is poetry, and everything that you said, man, you're dropping a lot of truth, and it's all beautiful. So I think a lot of people, when they hear the phrase Poet Laureate, there's this sense of reverence and honor about it, but they might not necessarily have the context or the empathy for why it might be an honor, what that experience might be. And it's not every day that you get to sit with one, so we really appreciate you coming in. I'm curious for you, what that experience was, what that meant to you, and how that continues to elevate what it is that you wish to do for your community, for Kansas, etc.
I'm the 7th Poet Laureate of the state of Kansas, and it's been interesting because I'm the first Latino, so automatically the community that I'm said to represent is Latinos. We're not monolithic. There are different issues in our community, and poetry does lend itself to political messaging sometimes. I understand that, and we write about the things that are true in our lives. But at the end of the day, I'm the 7th Poet Laureate, and I want to share poetry for everyone, all types of poetry, not just poetry for the Latino community. And that's been something that I've encountered a little bit, that I now am a voice for a particular group of people, and it's been uncomfortable to have to walk that line and say that that I'm not that. I do share aspirations for the marginalized in our community, and I write about that. My last book, When Mango Grows in Kansas, was a Kansas Notable book, and it's in English and Spanish because I wanted to be accessible to the community, and I didn't want language to be a barrier, because language is a barrier to our worlds, and I wanted those worlds to mend together. I wanted the Spanish speakers, English speakers, to be able to have conversations through the poetry. I was able to travel the state as Poet Laureate, so the original mission was to extend poetry into areas in rural communities that didn't have access to the arts, in the sense that they would ask us to come in with children's poetry, have conversations about it. And the work I was sharing didn't really fit in those communities. But what I realized is, with the poetry that I was sharing, that I was being vulnerable and open, and we found common ground, because everyone has a dream and hope for their family. Everyone wants safety. Everyone wants to come from a place of abundance, not scarcity. But how do we find those spaces? I've gone into conversations with individuals who are very, very leaning one way or the other, and I stay very centered in those spaces because I'm here to share my truth, and it's my story. And if it's been politicized along the way, I can't change that. But my message is one of my experience. So the Poet Laureateship has allowed me to add a title so I can enter rooms I normally don't have access to. And it's also allowed me to bring other poets along the way with me that normally don't have access to those rooms that I'm walking into now. And I think that's the most important part about being the Poet Laureate is accessibility for others who want to go down the same path that I've gone down. They've used the term non-academic for me because I don't have a college degree. I'm the first Poet Laureate not to have one. And but I've been a traveling poet for over a decade. I've lived that life, of going from venue to venue, hawking books just to get gas to your next event. You're 2 books away from not making it to your next stop. That's a different type of living when it comes to the practice of art. When you know that it is your vocation, you continue down that path. So to have lived on that side of it, right? And I'll tell you the story of the day I found out I was Poet Laureate. I worked at a hotel here in town, an extended stay hotel, and I was a glorified janitor, property manager is the term they have for it. And we had our presentation 2 weeks prior at the Topeka and Shawnee County Public Library. It was me and another poet. I still don't know who it was. And I was at peace that day when I went into it, and I was prepared for it because, all I was doing at that point in time was working overnights, getting up, doing poetry, working. Like I was in this kind of constant process of giving so I can have return. And I'm outside shoveling trash into a dumpster, and my phone rings, and that's when I found out that I was the next Poet Laureate. And that was that switch for me. I was like, oh, okay, this is why I've continued to do what I do as long as I have. It's because I know that somewhere there's someone who wants to hear a story like mine. Not only the story of a person who's second generation in this country, but also the story of someone who's working class. And that's the story that I've been sharing as Poet Laureate across the state for the last 3 years. I don't know if that answers your question. I might be on a tangent here, but
it did, and I love it. And you use the word vocation in there, and I found that really beautiful. It's not something that you just do for the sake of it being a hobby. It's not something that you do just to pay the bills. It's something that calls and speaks to your heart, and it ends up becoming this thing. James Baldwin talked about the poets, and he used the poets as sort of the super concept for the artist. And he talked about the second that you experience the world and the truth in it, there's this impulse in you to be able to share it. And he said it is what artists must do, and it's that sense of must, right? This passion that pulls us, and there's no other choice. We're going to find a way, no matter how. If I've got 2 books in the trunk to my next stop, then we're going to find the people that need to find them. And from that vocation, if you stick with it long enough, comes the validation.
Validation is an interesting word, right? It's humbling for me, and it did feel validating. It does feel validating. I can't lie about that. But as quickly as you start to rise, there are those who will tug at you, right? The individuals who will start to question whether you should be in those positions. And then imposter syndrome gets bigger as your public facing self gets bigger. And I've had to work through that, but poetry lends itself well to that. So I was able to sit and write about it and have conversations with myself about why I'm doing what I do. And the answer to that's real simple: is it's who I am. I've been a poet. I believe in living artfully, and in particular poetically. Living in a space of aspiration, hope, and opportunity and truth, and always looking for beauty.
I'm not gonna cry today. I can think of few metaphors more poetically. It feels poetry in motion at the time that you get the call is when you're throwing the trash out, and then all of a sudden it's just this remembrance that no matter what it is that I may be physically doing in this moment, I remember who it is that I am, and will always be ready for the call and ready to rise into it. And it's been such an inspiring thing to see you rise to that call through the challenges, through the opportunity. But we also know that spirit and that vocation doesn't stop in any particular place. So what is the great Huascar Medina up to nowadays?
Now you're gassing me up. So, the transition to the next Poet Laureate is next. I want to make sure people know that we're taking applications for the 8th Poet Laureate of Kansas. And I look forward to seeing who it is, because it's a 4-year term now. There's a stipend for the position, so you are being paid for your craft consistently. And anyone who's an artist understands how difficult that is. So there's space for growth in that kind of arena, and exposure and visibility, and networks have been built along the way. So I behoove poets to apply for the position, because when I applied, I didn't think I would get it. So if you're having that feeling right now, please, I tell anyone who's trying to do something, have someone else tell you no. Don't tell yourself no. I am right now trying to go across the state and set up these Words Save Lives events. I recently received a Poet Laureate Fellowship from the Academy of American Poets. 22 poets received them across the United States to run civic programs within their communities. I've decided to take a program called Words Save Lives, which started in Lawrence with Marsha Epstein, LMSW. She started in 2014, and it's in a collaboration between artists and the community to share space and create a space of safety surrounding the topic of suicide, individuals who've been impacted directly or indirectly, supporters of family members who are going through suicidal ideations, or people who work in the field, trying to ensure that individuals are safe. It's a very particular event. We have space for all poets, for all forms of art, for all forms of expression. We want individuals to come in and be able to express themselves freely. We want the space to be non-clinical. The event has happened on September 10th since 2014, which is World Suicide Prevention Awareness Day. And now we're doing it throughout the month, and there's 12 events. We're going as far out as Colby, Kansas, Dodge City, Arkansas City. We're in Kansas City. We're in Emporia, Salina, Topeka on the 10th, of September at Arts Connect, who've been super gracious about providing space for us to come in there. It's being hosted by Annette Billings and Sue Edgerton, who run the Speakeasy Poetry Group. And there'll be individuals from the community who work in the field. They have opportunities to set table and share information. So there's this outreach aspect to it. It's a non-clinical space. It's a space to share your light and your hope and the reasons why you're still here. Find reasons why you're glad to be here and tell people why. But it also, art becomes an entry point to ask someone, how are you doing? And if someone's not doing well, what a great opportunity to let someone know.
Words save lives.
Words save lives. So simple, right?
And so true. I know that even amongst, Topeka is a pretty tight-knit community. I think when you have the courage to reach out and to ask how somebody is doing, or for them to share their testimony as to why it is that they got into one art or another and what journey it's taken them on, we find out more often than not that words do save lives. There's, without getting too specific, just stories very, very near and dear to our heart about what it has done to lift us up. And it's nice. Nice is not an appropriate word. It's empowering and it's inspiring to see how it doesn't just lift us up, but when we hold it true as a vocation, as a passion, as who we are, and we use that as a tool for community to lift others up, those words might not just save our own lives, but have the capacity to go on and make an impact to save lives throughout the state, throughout the country. Truly happy that the award was given to you to continue along with that project. And for anybody that is looking to get involved with that on September 10th, we'll definitely continue to share and post links to make sure that people are aware. You've got quite a bit going on, and there may be a few different items that you'd like for our audience and our community to know about. So as far as what you've got coming up in the near future, what do you want people to be aware of so that they have a chance to tap in?
Definitely Word Save Lives. If you go to wordsavelives.org, you can also go to our Instagram at wordsavelives.org. We're also on Facebook at Word Save Lives. You'll see all the events across the state, information on how to join up and join maybe next year's event or one of the locations in the state. I'm also working with the book festival this year. Gary Jackson's a poet from Topeka who'll be reading there. He's part of a talk about origin stories, and I'll be moderating that talk, so I'm really excited to meet Gary Jackson in person. I've heard his work. Also, Michael Kliber-Diggs is going to be there. He also has ties to Kansas. Brian Daldorf is also from Kansas. They'll be doing a talk about poetry in prisons. Michael Kliber-Diggs works with the Minnesota Writing Prison Workshop, and Brian Daldorf works with Douglas County Jail, I believe. He's been going in there and teaching poetry for a long time. So coming into the space, seeing how poetry is utilized, I think is wonderful. So the book festival is on the Saturday, I think this is the 24th, at Washburn University. It's the second year it's going to be at Washburn University. And we have New York Times bestsellers there. We have some really great poets out of Kansas. Tracy Brimhall is going to be there, Melissa Fight Johnson, Megan Kaminsky. There are a lot of good Kansas poets that are going to be at this event. And it's free, it's open to the public. So you get to meet poets, there's food trucks, there's beverages, there's music, there's open mic. That's the 24th. All the Word Save Lives events are across the state. Please go to the website to find the calendar of events there. You'll see that there as well. I'll be at the Land Institute the day after the Prairie Festival. I'm the keynote speaker, talking about newness and diversity and planting seeds of change. I think it's the topic I'm leaning towards right now. So I think that's the topic, especially if you think about my book title being Mango Grows in Kansas. So
that's right, planting all sorts of seeds, and we'll watch the increase. Huascar, if people want to reach out to you directly, I know that you stay on the move, but what's the best way for people to engage with you?
Just go to huascarmedina.com. There's a contact link there. Email goes directly to me, and I'll see it. I'm open to do collaboration with anyone in any field. And I've been open to that process this entire time that I've been Poet Laureate, and I'd like to finish my term as Poet Laureate this year, building new relationships.
The truth is poetry, and this man just dropped a lot of truth. poetry in motion. I know that you stay on the move, but it's been incredible seeing that motion go into all sorts of empowering things. I am excited to know just how many lives you touch through your gift, and hopefully there's someone out there that is going through their own experience that may be thinking, is art something that I can step into? What would it be for? And maybe there's someone out there that has a chance to experience a vocation, and God only knows where that takes them. Huascar, it's been an honor.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you, man.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found today's episode informative and inspiring. If you liked what you heard and you'd like to hear more, visit pathwaysmeans.com to check out a ton of additional content from the CPM team. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok, where we post daily content and engage with creators like you. Signing off for Pathways and Means, we'll see you next time.